say.
Because
I don't know.
I learned some stuff about the book
Mhm.
recently, and this is a 13-year project,
Oh,
something like that. He had been researching for 30 years.
if Jordan Peterson
13.
is listening, I'm so sorry. I feel like I'm being so rude
No,
to
don't.
this like massive undertaking because like this.
No, I think we're just being open about
Yeah.
it. Like, here's the thing.
Hello and welcome back to episode 7 of Lessons Learned. I'm Dylan,
And I'm Evan.
and welcome to our semi-new set. And that also works for people listening on Spotify because we should sound pretty good. I would hope, at least. You know,
Yeah, I would hope so. But who knows?
but who knows? Maybe
Maybe.
we don't sound any better at all. But yeah, welcome to our new set. Hopefully this is a little bit more pleasing to the eye and pleasing to the ears. I'm going to do a quick little recap, and Evan's going to help me with this little recap because,
I'll do my best.
all right.
Here's the thing: is I've just gone so far forward. Like I've read enough for 3 episodes at this point,
Mm-hmm.
and
You need a recap too.
it's all merging for me.
It's all.
Yeah, so I have to know like the last thing you remember.
Okay, so I'm not going to recap all the way from like the beginning of the series because we did that last episode, and that seems just a little bit redundant.
Yeah, we're just talking about myth now. So
Yeah, we're talking about myth. So I'm just going to recap the myth. So the very first thing we did was lay the foundation of like what Jordan Peterson's going to discuss for myth, which was the cognitive model. And that was the episode where I was just like brain dead the entire time, or at least it felt like it. And then last episode, we really got into the myths. We were really talking about, what myth was it? It was the one with the like cosmic egg and stuff.
that's the Tao. That's
Tao.
the Chinese myth. But we were also talking
Oh.
about Marduk
Yeah, it was Marduk.
and the
That's what
Mesopotamians.
Mesopotamians. Yes, we
Yeah.
were talking about the Mesopotamian myth. And basically, what we were kind of we talked about the Mesopotamian myth, and we kind of talked about how it affected people and their culture and stuff. But ultimately, I think what you and me ended up discussing, which was an opposition of what Jordan Peterson was doing,
Mm-hmm.
as he was comparing all myths, including Christianity and stuff, to to Norse mythology and stuff. I know he didn't talk about that, but Mesopotamian, as we talked about, we discussed the differences.
Mm-hmm.
And we really broke down the huge differences. And I mean, ultimately, we concluded that Christianity is drastically different from all these other myths described because the gods and like the super beings, in a
Mm-hmm.
sense, and these other myths are subject to vices, whereas our Christian God is not. And same thing with Jewish God, right? Like we believe in the same God.
Yahweh, yeah.
Yeah, Yahweh. So he's not subject to vices. He's
Right.
not subject to imperfections, unlike every other God. And that was the huge difference, which is like a huge fundamental difference.
Mm-hmm.
But that's really where we ended up tying the episode, was there. And then we didn't go past Mesopotamian myths. You finished the story, and then we're like, this is good. And we just talked about it.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. We're going to get into some other differences.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good thing to keep in mind.
Okay.
We are going to start this episode. Most of this one is going to focus on, most of it's going to focus on Egyptian mythology.
Okay.
Do you know anything about that?
I mean, I know like sun god Ra,
Mm-hmm.
because that was like I did an Egyptian mythology project in like high school or something, and
Sure.
that was a big joke among us, was like, oh, the sun god Ra, and like we'd be like, because it was Michigan, so we'd be like, curse the sun god because we want a snow day, so we'd be like,
Right.
go away.
Yeah.
And then I know it was like really weird. I know there's a lot of abnormalities in regards to like there's a lot of animal human hybrid,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know much other than that.
Okay. Well, I know about Ra and some of the other gods. I know a lot of random mythology because of a video game I used to play called Smite.
Oh,
It's like
really?
League of Legends but with gods.
Okay.
So like my main was Ra.
Oh,
And I know my guy Ra.
wow.
Anyways,
Okay, so we both know about Ra
yeah, I mean
in a
there's like
sense.
Ra and Sobek, Horus.
I know
Um,
Horus.
there's Isis, who, for obvious reasons, they went to like a different name that she has called Iset.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'll refer to her as
Okay.
because I think she'll come up at some point.
Yeah.
Um, Geb is another Earth guy. He's like made of the ground. So, but there's some ones I haven't heard of. But, anyways, let's get into the actual
Yeah, let's go for it.
story. So he starts off talking about Egyptian mythology by talking about the world serpent Ptah, or maybe
Okay.
it's just Ta. It might be a silent P. But he created by his mind and his word. That's how Ta created the world.
So Ta is like
He's like a creator.
he's the creator. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so he says the Egyptians realized that consciousness and linguistic ability were vital to the existence of things, precisely as vital as the unknowable matrix of their being. And the takeaway from this part is his mind and his word is what he's talking about, consciousness and linguistic ability. So this is something that he does a lot, and I can't tell how I feel about it, so I'll see how you feel about it as we go along.
Okay.
He's saying that because Ptah created by his mind and his word, that means that the Egyptians valued consciousness and linguistic ability. And like they thought it was so important that that's what created the world.
Okay. Can you just read that again or restate that just so I can understand it and it's so I don't make the wrong assumption here.
Mm-hmm.
So can you just
I can reread the quote.
Yeah, go for it.
So Egyptians realized that consciousness and linguistic ability were vital to the existence of things.
Okay.
And he's saying that they thought that because of the fact that the guy that created everything used his mind and his word. Do you see that connection?
I see the connection. I don't think it makes sense.
I don't know how convincing it is.
Well, I don't think it makes sense because it's hard to kind of wrap my mind around that connection because like as Christians we believe in the truth and that God came before anyone and anything. So like for us seeing this as Christians, it's like obviously this story came post the Egyptians, right? So like
what do you mean? What story?
the mythology.
Like it came after it came after the story?
No. Like Egyptians were a thing, and then the mythology came from that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like to say that the Egyptians value language, just for an easy summarization, because the Egyptian god used language to create the world, the Egyptians value language. The problem is that the Egyptians came before the myth.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Okay.
So it's not that the Egyptians value language because of their God valuing language or that their creator valued language, but it was because the Egyptians valued language, period, that they created a myth in which their creator valued language, or at least demonstrated a value of language. Does that make sense?
Well, I think that's kind of his point. He's saying that they implicitly they understood the language is important, so they implicitly threw that into their creation story.
Okay.
That's what he's arguing. I'm saying I don't know if that value is there. I don't know if just the fact that I don't know if just the fact that this world serpent created with his word in mind is evidence enough to say that that's what they valued.
Gotcha. No, I get what you're saying.
And maybe it is, but
I mean, again, I think that's just a hard point to argue because like we've talked about Genesis and that God created everything. He spoke the universe into existence, right? So that's the value of our word, and like that's why we've both been trying to be cognizant of the words we use and what we say because God gave us the ability to speak and communicate, so those words carry a lot of power and weight.
Right.
So I think it's innate in human nature that words carry a lot of weight and that we value them. I mean, we teach a whole subject in school on language, the language
Yeah.
we speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's obviously important to us in a Judeo-Christian value system, but it seemingly becomes like, I feel like you can observe that it's innately important in just humans in general.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think you can necessarily abstract from the mythology itself that it's important so much as it's just part of us. It's part of human.
Right.
Because I mean, how many other mythologies, and I know we haven't started yet, but how many other mythologies you could extrapolate the same conclusion based on, like, this god does this god does this.
And they're similar.
Yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like it's more of a dig for something that's innate rather than like an actual observation made from the culture.
Mm-hmm. I don't think we have a good answer right now to this issue,
Mm-hmm.
but in the next episode, or maybe a couple down the road,
Mm-hmm.
I think that this is an important thing to keep in mind. Whether or not he's taking something out of this more than is appropriate or justifiable. Yeah. I think that's something that we'll be able to talk about later, probably better with some other examples.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we can leave that there.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a good conclusion to it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think I think we can toss around similar ideas, but I don't think there's a hard conclusion we can come to.
But I think we recognize that there's something fishy about it.
I think it's he's jumping to a conclusion that we're trying to come to now, which is just like a soft one.
Mm-hmm.
Like, like that sounds right, but like I don't have any other grounds other than it just sounds right.
Right. So we'll talk more about that, I think, later.
Yeah. Okay.
With more examples.
Yeah.
Because it's not the last time that'll happen.
Okay.
So
okay.
He starts talking about the pharaohs.
Okay.
In Egypt. He says that they, in their mythological system, they thought that the pharaohs were the successor to Ptah or Ptah.
Okay.
He says the pharaoh is the incarnation of Mat, a term translated by truth, but whose general meaning is good order and hence right or justice. And there was a similar idea with the Mesopotamians, that they thought the ruler was divine and someone to be emulated. So pretty much what he's saying here is that because the pharaohs were thought to be descendants of this world serpent, they were the incarnation or embodiment of truth and order and what is right.
Interesting.
So you think that's how they thought about the world?
And
which we saw last time with Marduk, I think.
Okay. Which was
as a way to embody.
Yeah, and this is a clarification mostly on just like my end.
Okay.
Are the pharaohs were like Egyptian kings, right? Like literal humans, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought.
But so that's what they thought. It's kind of like how he sees meaning or valence in the material world.
Okay.
Is that these were people, the pharaohs were, but they were also literally the divine beings. Like the spirit of the divine was in them.
Okay. I understand. I feel like I understand enough to like, yeah.
So yeah, they had divine power.
Really?
Basically.
Interesting. Okay, so again, you're much more well read on the Bible than I am. But when like in Moses' story, wasn't that during like this Egyptian era?
Yeah,
with pharaohs and stuff?
He led the Israelites out of Egypt. Yeah,
okay. And like that's one of my favorite stories.
And
it's mostly from the Disney movie King of Egypt.
Okay. Never seen it.
Oh, we'll have to watch it sometime.
Okay.
I love it for the art and the story. It's very beautifully done. Yeah, the parting of the Red Sea in that movie is incredible. I'll nerd out about it with you later. But
okay.
When Moses goes to talk to the Pharaoh, right? And again, correct me if I'm ever wrong here, but there's this whole display of like magic between Moses, who's working with God, and God's working through him, and then the Pharaoh's kind of
magicians.
Yeah, magicians.
Yeah.
And because Tim, our pastor, talked about this, and he was talking about how basically those magicians were using like the devil.
Yeah, so pretty much how the story goes, and I've only read it once or twice,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know it as well as our pastor, obviously.
Yeah, yeah.
But Moses goes and like uses magic given from God to like do something. I don't remember all the examples anymore, but there's a couple times where it happens.
Yeah, he turns his staff into a snake.
That's
right?
the last one.
That's the last one. Okay.
But he does some other ones, and then the magicians also do the same thing.
Right.
So then pretty much the Pharaoh won't listen to Moses.
Because it can be replicated.
Right. And then with the snake, Moses turns his into a snake, and then the magicians turn their staffs into snakes. And then I think that the Moses' snake eats the other ones.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yeah, it wins.
And then the Pharaoh still doesn't listen, but
Right. I guess kind of where I'm like trying to go with that is to tie Egyptian mythology and kind of, I guess, the root behind it
yeah.
into a timeline that we're familiar with of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if they believed in all of this other stuff in opposition of Christianity,
Mm-hmm.
but obviously, or no, I guess it wouldn't be obvious. Christianity was just basically being prophesized at this point, right? Through Moses, like during the time of Egyptian mythology, Christianity was basically prophesized, right?
What do you mean? Prophesied by whom?
Well, like, because isn't Moses one of the first,
Like writers?
yeah.
I think so. I don't know for sure, dude.
I'm delving into such a rabbit hole that
You're
we're
asking my historiography
yeah.
here, and I don't know.
Man, I guess like my point in this is like, is it possible that these other mythologies derive from an evil power or like an unholy
Bro.
power? What?
We're gonna talk about that next episode.
In next episode. I'm
Yep.
so sorry,
'Cause that
everyone.
one, next episode, we're gonna be talking about the pre-cosmogonic being
Mm-hmm.
that's like this giant serpent, basically, and how that's where everything came out of.
Okay.
So we'll talk about that.
Okay.
But I think you're on the right track.
Okay. I'm sorry for everyone listening that is now very intrigued by what I just said.
Hopefully.
And hopefully is intrigued by what I just said and now has to wait. I'm sorry that there's a waiting period.
Gotta keep them interested.
Yeah,
So,
right.
Back to Egyptians.
Yeah.
So he spends a lot of the time here talking about Osiris and Horus.
Okay.
So
And can you just clarify those two?
yeah, I'm going to.
Yeah, okay.
Because he runs through like the whole story.
Okay.
So Osiris ruled Egypt wisely and fairly.
Mm-hmm.
Originally, he was like the king of Egypt, and his brother Seth killed him and dismembered his body into a bunch of pieces and threw him in the underworld. Okay. So
Yeah.
that's where this story starts.
Okay.
So we have this wise ruler, or like this fair ruler, and then he gets killed by his evil brother and dismembered and stuff. Okay.
Okay.
So Peterson says that Osiris's death signifies two things.
Mm-hmm.
One, it signifies the tendency of a static ruling idea, system of evaluation, or a particular story, no matter how initially magnificent or appropriate,
Mm-hmm.
to become increasingly irrelevant with time.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that sound?
What do you mean?
What do you think of that? Do I need to break it down or anything?
I mean,
I'll deal with the two things separately.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that one?
I mean, I think it makes sense to me, but you can definitely break that down and simplify it just a little bit.
Okay, so all I pretty much have to do is make it more concise.
Yeah.
So he's just saying that any ruling idea or value or story, no matter how good it initially was, is going to become more and more relevant the more time passes.
And I think we see that now and maybe in a different sense, but I think we see that now with Christianity.
Mm.
I mean, think about like the time of Jesus.
I think, though, it depends.
Sure.
Because I'd say for us, it certainly hasn't.
No, I mean, I feel like in one sense it has, in one sense it hasn't. But I would definitely argue that if you're going to say it has diminished, it's only diminished through external forces saying it needs to be diminished. not naturally, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I think what he's saying here is that no matter how good it initially was, it's just going to be less useful over time. I think that's not the case with Christianity.
That's not the case at all.
So
Yeah.
that's the first one.
Okay.
Number two is that the dangers that necessarily accrue to a state that forgets or refuses. Wait, what? Oh, it signifies that. Oh, the emphasis here is the dangers. I understand now. So it signifies the dangers that necessarily accrue to a state that forgets or refuses to admit the existence of the immortal deity of evil. So pretty much what he's saying here is that Osiris was naive by not acknowledging the fact that evil exists in the form of his brother, and it just kind of blindsides him, and that's why he dies. So he's saying that basically this part of the story tells us, one, that new ideas have to be changed to be good, or ideas have to be changed to be good, because they won't be good forever. They'll lose their relevance over time. And two, he's saying that it's a lot more dangerous when you don't accept the existence of evil, because it'll overthrow you sometime when you're not looking.
Okay. The first part, I feel like I completely disagree with.
What?
The ideas need to be changed to continue to be relevant.
I mean, I think that's what he's saying here. Do you disagree with the fact that that's what he's saying?
Yes, I disagree with that being said.
Okay,
I don't
do you
think that's true. But the other half, I would agree with.
No, sorry, let me clarify. Do you think that I interpreted it wrong?
No.
Okay, you don't agree with what he's saying.
I don't agree with what he's saying.
Yeah, he's saying, any system evaluation is going to become increasingly irrelevant with time.
Yeah, that's just not true.
I think if you look at it historically, it's got some credibility outside of Christianity.
I wonder why.
Me too. Yeah.
I want to say the first thing.
By the way, you're free to disagree as much as you want.
Oh, I know.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Because we're all allowed to have our own personal thoughts, because this is America.
Right.
No, but I'll start with what I agree with first. I agree that if you ignore the presence of evil, it will bite you.
And it becomes, a lot more dangerous.
And the first thing that comes to mind is, well, actually, there's a couple things that come to mind directly from the Bible. One, the story of Cain and Abel, right? And it's not really elaborated. It's actually a rather short story for anybody that hasn't read that story of the Bible. It's pretty short. It's pretty much a paragraph story. It's actually impressive how short these stories in the Bible are that are usually really expanded upon. But at least that's what took me by surprise.
I agree.
But I would be hard pressed to believe that Abel wasn't aware of an kind of just like odd presence from his brother Cain, especially after when Abel gave an offering to God and it was of high quality, and Cain gave like a mid-tier kind of like scraps offering to God, and God was upset with him because he didn't offer like an actual quality thing. I'm hard pressed to believe that Abel wasn't like, oh, why is my brother acting weird? And I think that's something that we can observe is like, he's ignoring something that's evil. You know, he's ignoring something that is possessing of malicious intent. But to be even more clear, because I know that's kind of like a interpretation thing of the story in the Bible, our pastor had mentioned this and it stuck out to me. Lion is used to describe both God and Satan, and it's because of, it is our job as Christians to learn the difference between Satan and God in their words, but they're both described as lions, right? So I think he's right in saying that, like, well, if you just ignore evil, it's just going to come back and bite you. Yeah, absolutely, because if God and Satan are both described as lions, that means that their words both hold power.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, to water it even down more, it's like in the Lion King, Scar and Mufasa are both lions and they're both very deadly, right? But if you don't differentiate between good and evil, they're both very powerful. They're both
Right.
very useful and deadly.
Yeah. And so something that he says about the people like Seth,
Mm-hmm.
the brother, is that one, they represent a pattern of absolute opposition to an established divine order,
Okay.
which I think that's pretty clear cut.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing that I think I want to hear your thoughts about, he says, such figures like Seth are motivated only to protect or advance their position in a power hierarchy.
Hmm.
That's all they want. They want to tear down that old system, that old order, so they can go up on the power hierarchy.
So, because I feel like the thing I disagreed with is going to tie into that.
Okay.
And the thing I disagreed with, in which you initially stated, was that Jordan Peterson, in his book, is saying that ideas need to be changing to continue to be relevant, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, and important and useful.
Yeah.
Completely wrong.
Yeah.
I would argue it's almost completely wrong.
I'm wondering, and maybe we are misinterpreting it because it seems like a really obvious contradiction
Mm-hmm.
where he's saying that, and maybe the focus is the ruling fetch, the one that's in charge.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I mean, he has static in parentheses.
Mm-hmm.
So if it means unchanging, but I mean, Christianity isn't a changing value system.
And that's exactly where I was going to drive this point, is like through Christianity, but also just general human nature. The idea of needing shelter to better your life doesn't change.
Right. The capacity for evil doesn't change.
Yeah. Like there's numerous things, like fundamental things in our lives that don't change. Those ideas don't change. They can't change because it's like necessity.
So I think one idea that can demonstrate the contradiction that he talks about is he's saying that you need to look out, or he's saying it. I think he would agree with, you need to always recognize that there's potential for some evil to happen maybe towards you.
Oh, absolutely. That's a huge mistake that I've experienced in my life.
Yeah, and so I think that the contradiction there is that on one hand he's saying that ideas lose their relevance over time. But on the other hand, I don't think he would ever say that the idea of being wary of evil is something that should lose its relevance ever.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe on like a broad societal level it can, when people get, I mean, what is it? That quote you like about good men and
yes.
Maybe that
strong men create good times create. Did I skip something? Hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times, and thus begins the cycle.
And maybe that's something to do with it. You know what I mean? Where it's like, if they have this comfortable order and then they forget about the idea of evil, maybe he thinks that evil shouldn't be forgotten about, but maybe he's saying that it is forgotten about.
I mean, I think this kind of breaks down into this idea of like boredom.
Why?
Well, I mean, we used to watch movies, right? Like, coming as a history buff, like, we used to watch, they used to only be able to do like 10-15 minute long movies because like film reels and cameras, they weren't advanced
like the Charlie Chaplin stuff.
Then they started getting longer and longer, hour and a half, to it. Now we're like Lord of the Rings is
a 12 hours
beastly long. Yeah, right. But then we saw something interesting in society, which is like a huge shift, especially in younger generations. Look at TikTok. How long are TikTok videos?
10 seconds to a minute.
Yeah, and granted, TikTok did open up a new feature where you can add a 10-minute video, and like they drive me up a wall. But that's besides the point.
There's also Vine.
Which was the
6-second videos.
And YouTube Shorts, which, I mean,
Instagram Reels,
Snapchat, whatever things they're called. I don't.
Stories, I think.
Yeah, I'm not a social media person. Ironic, I handle our social media. But my point is like, you see this weird shift from like, like attention spans aren't inherently short, but because of the media that or because of technology, the media that we can produce is only so long.
Mm-hmm.
Then you start seeing it get longer and longer and longer and longer, and people are still more than interested to
Yeah.
watch. And recently, like, society has been flipping, like
Shorter, shorter,
shorter,
shorter.
shorter, shorter.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see this even like when you watch TV shows, right?
Yeah.
When you sit down, or like if just a general populace, when they sit down and you're like, hey, do you want to watch a movie? They're like, "Ah, a movie takes so long. Hey, do you want to watch like 50 10-minute segments of YouTube series, or like,
Yeah.
20 episode, like a whole season of like these 45-minute long episodes?" And somebody's like, yeah, and then like 8 hours goes by.
Right.
So I think it's like people are like, society, and maybe this isn't just society, maybe this is just technological advancements that we as humans need to kind of learn to like use as more of a tool instead of a crutch,
Mm-hmm.
because I think it's just making your attention spans shorter and shorter and shorter.
Yeah.
And my point where I'm going with this is, if your attention span's getting shorter and there's a difficult idea to grasp, are you going to want to listen to it?
No.
No. It needs to be changed, or it needs to be dismissed. One of those two things needs to happen.
Mm.
And if people who are seeking higher power see that opportunity, they're more likely to dismiss beneficial ideas and give quick, easy answers, right?
Mm.
I think we see a lot of
So
stuff
you're talking
like that.
about acting for yourself in the short term, even
Mhm.
if it's detrimental to the long term?
Yes. I mean, think about it. Like, we have like constitutional rights. Think of like the Second Amendment. It is easier to say, because there's people in our country that are dying, which is not okay, we should get rid of the Second Amendment altogether. That is an easy short-term solution. I don't need to think about it. Okay, if there's no guns, then nobody can have a gun, so nobody
Right.
dies. Period. Done. We're done.
Mm.
But
But it ignores like the nuances of the issue.
it ignores the nuances of the issues, and you're taking a short-term idea. You're
Mhm.
taking this quick and easy, oh, easy, boom, done, and the idea is over. It's gone. It's been removed, rather than going, okay, well, how do we overcome this obstacle? How do we overcome this situation?
Mm-hmm.
It's a much more difficult thing to do. It's a longer process. It's the same idea. It's just harder to do when you don't want to.
I see what you
It's an inactive society.
Yeah.
So that's like my biggest gripe with at least what we presume he's saying,
Mm-hmm.
is just like, ideas have to change. They absolutely don't have to change. It's just that people either want an easier idea,
Yeah,
or they want to dismiss it.
I don't know. It's probably giving him the benefit of the doubt to say that we're misunderstanding the quote.
Sure.
I'll say it's possible,
Oh yeah. We're not.
but
We're not Jordan Peterson.
No. It seems pretty clear cut though. It seems
Yeah.
like
What I'd also like to point out is, you're a rather smart individual.
debatable.
And you do or I shouldn't say pride, you do pour yourself pretty heavily into this book. I'd be hard pressed to say that out of all the time you've spent on this book, that you're getting this wrong, this one thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, we're gonna see more stuff that we disagree with, anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very possible. So
Yeah.
I'd say
Yeah.
we disagree.
Yeah, definitely disagree.
Okay, so he says Osiris was great. He was a really good ruler and stuff, but he was naive and blind towards evil,
Mhm.
and that's what led to his demise. And that demonstrates the danger of assuming that. Well, this is something that I added. This isn't what he thought.
Sure.
This demonstrates the danger of assuming that human nature is good,
Yeah.
because I think that's been an idea since Rousseau,
Mm-hmm.
was that society's bad. We as people are good.
But we as people make society. Just a silent nod. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a contradiction, isn't it? No, I mean, he thought that the only way you could really be uncorrupted was to go be a yeoman farmer out in like the boonies. Just kind of be by yourself out of a society, and then that's where you can be the most good, and that's where there's a lack
Well-
of corruption. And this is
No, because even in that situation, you can falter into corruption, because if you can't handle like can we agree that murder's wrong?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you live literally in isolation with no one else around you, and somebody walks onto your property and is just trying to be friendly, but in your eyes it's like your land, so you just murder that person, you've already fallen into corruption.
So yeah, well, that's the difficulty with his really idyllic ideas,
Mm-hmm.
as they're kind of a thought experiment
Sure.
and not super tailored to reality.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, the biggest reason it's not is the fact that we are not good by nature at all.
Mm-hmm.
And we can just see how that's a big thing now about how culture's oppressive and everything like that,
Yeah.
or supposedly.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes from the idea that society's corrupting and the individuals are the good. So,
Again, like it,
but I think that's, I guess my
people
point
make
is,
up society.
yeah, well, and I think the way that this connects to the story of Osiris is that he didn't focus on the fact that people are evil or Seth was evil.
Mm-hmm.
So he got blindsided by that, and that's
Mhm.
exactly what happens. That's what can happen if you assume human nature's good. I mean,
Yeah.
I think an example of that could be, Stalin and communism.
Mm-hmm.
They assumed that human nature was good, which meant that if you give all the power to one person, he'll
Mm.
distribute it equally to everyone, and
Yeah.
it'll be great. And then they learned the hard way that human nature is not good, and that if someone has all of that power, then they're going to do whatever they want with it.
Yeah.
So I thought that was an important highlight for this in a way we can see it in the more modern world.
Yeah. No, I get it.
So to continue the story of Osiris
Mm-hmm.
and Horus. So he's killed. He's in the underworld. His wife, Iset,
Mm-hmm.
makes herself pregnant with Osiris's dismembered phallus, which is interesting.
At least it's not as weird as Loki in Norse mythology.
Understandable. Yeah, there's some weird stuff with him.
There's really
He
Weird
highlights
stuff.
that quote about the phallus with "In chaos lurks great potential," because Osiris is dead, but she still manages to impregnate herself with it. So like, where there's all this chaos, good stuff can still happen. Which was just a kind of a side note.
that's such a bizarre point to make, because like we've talked about the unknown and known
Mhm.
for a while now
Mhm.
as the foundation of this, and we've already established that the unknown can present, I mean, both good and bad, but ultimately it would, I would argue, to almost always promote something good. You'd always get something good from the unknown, even if it was like an ouchie.
Then you learn from it.
Then you learn from it, and that's good because you
Mhm.
know not to do. And I'm not saying the whole experience is always good, but like there's always something good to glean from it. And I
Right.
think that's just a bizarre like observation to make
Well,
to
and
prove that point.
this is the kind of reading in that he's doing
Mm-hmm.
to a lot of these stories, is saying, oh, because she did that thing, that demonstrates that they thought that in chaos is like the ability or the potential for like great things. And that's that kind of reading in that I'm
But
not
you
too
could-
sure about.
I would read. Okay, so if we're gonna, if the point I'm trying to prove is that from chaos can come good things, then I would say that Seth killing Osiris. Is
Yes.
the name? Okay. Seth killing Osiris is another example of good coming from chaos, because Seth killed Osiris for a reason, and not knowing that reason,
Mhm.
but doing with such confidence would imply that he thought, oh, well, I don't know the outcome of this, but I can only assume it's good, so I'm going to do it anyways.
Yeah. Well,
That's this.
I think you're not going to like this quote because it's the same idea. He says the degeneration
Mm-hmm.
of the state or domain of order and its descent into chaos serves merely to fructify that domain. And fructify, I had to look it up to double check, means to make something fruitful or productive.
Okay, can you break that one down?
Mhm. So what he's saying is when a state or domain of order degenerates and descends into chaos, all that's doing is making that domain have potential for productivity. So he's saying like, yeah, this domain fell into chaos from order, but that just means it's productive now.
I don't even think that makes sense.
I think he's highlighting the fact that when you go into chaos, there is potential,
Right.
which is undoubtedly true.
Yeah.
But he's saying that this state of order going into chaos serves merely as a way to get like productivity or to fructify that domain, to make it fruitful or productive. Which I don't think it I don't know if I would say that it serves to do that. I think that potential for productivity comes as a consequence of being in a state of chaos.
Yeah.
But degeneration into chaos doesn't serve to make productivity.
No. Like, I think I'm struggling because it's like, I know I disagree. I'm just like, I don't know where I disagree because I just disagree with it all.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean,
and I'm going to ask a question to clarify.
and
so
we
I can
could
make a
also
better
say
point.
Jordan Peterson might not be saying this
Mm-hmm.
as much as he thinks that this is what the Egyptians are saying.
Sure.
And even then, that goes back to the problem of him reading into these stories to take this out of it.
And okay, that's a whole different issue in of itself, but I think it's a great point. You can't read somebody's religion as an outsider and try to extrapolate meaning from it.
Mm-hmm.
You're just not going to do it successfully. You're just not.
That's a bold statement to make, my friend.
Okay.
You're going to be proved correct next episode.
you can't do this to me.
We might talk
But
about it this episode.
No, because like
you don't know the
I've heard this so many times. Well, I read the Bible and reading the Bible made me not want to be Christian anymore. Or, well, I read the Bible, so now I know why I don't want to be Christian. Okay, here's the problem. You need to understand the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
You need to understand the text. You need to understand it. I, as a Christian, granted, only for a little over a year, would not be bold enough to say, oh, yeah, I understand the Bible. No. No, I don't.
I understand like 1 or 2 points, maybe.
I understand a couple points, but like that's why we have a pastor. But that's also why it's so crucial to find a good pastor, and ultimately derives from knowing the Word of God, spending time with the Bible, praying about it, praying to God, and trying to work in a community of people that you know and trust and hold similar beliefs with,
right,
to work through that. That's what you and me do all the time. We disagree on so many different things, sometimes for the fun of it, but a lot of it is because we're poking holes in each other's statement to find the flaw or to solidify the foundation of it. And when you come in from as an outsider and you just read the Bible and you're just like, I think this is what this means. Nope. You're probably just wrong.
Because we as Christians could be wrong.
Yeah.
Unless we spent a long time.
Oh, absolutely. And even then,
I think that's important to point out is that we're not saying this like pridefully or anything.
No.
Like as Christians, it's just matter of fact.
No, absolutely. You cannot walk into a religion, read their text, for just to cover all bases. You can't just read a text and be like, I understand that. No, you don't. I promise you don't.
Yeah.
Because there's so much going through it. Like,
so we've already seen some stuff that okay, you'll have to clarify for me.
Mm-hmm.
Have we seen stuff that he's gotten incorrect about Christianity so far?
No.
Okay, we're going to in coming episodes. Okay, but what we have seen is differences between other religions and Christianity.
Yes, we've observed the differences that he didn't make because he was making similarities.
Yeah.
Rather than differences.
He's just comparing, not contrasting. There's stuff in here that really demonstrates the fact that he doesn't understand Christianity. And something that the professor I was talking to, one of the things that he brought up is Jordan Peterson obviously knows his neuropsychology very well.
Oh, yeah.
He knows about a lot of things.
Jordan Peterson's very, very smart.
Super. He's brilliant.
Yes.
Obviously.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Exactly is what he is. He's brilliant.
Yes. The issue is you can't be an expert in everything.
No.
And the question is, if we know that he's gotten stuff wrong about Christianity, how much is he getting stuff wrong with these other mythologies?
And I think that's the point I'm going
Yeah,
to.
that's why I brought this up now instead of waiting.
Yeah, is that like and that's the point I was just trying to make in regards to like, okay, so like if you're trying to find the point of like good can come from chaos, and that's why you would instigate chaos. And instigate chaos. That makes sense, right? Yeah. So then I'm gonna say that Seth killing Osiris is proof that people look to chaos for like good sources and like for good.
So you're making like a moral relativist argument, kind of.
Yeah. I mean, you can you can't extrapolate anything from anything, but if you're looking hard enough, you can find something within.
And you're kind of pointing out what postmodernists say, or a part of postmodernism.
I don't know what that is, but yeah,
it's the idea that if language is all subjective, then like stories and language is like meaningless, basically, because you can just pull whatever you want out of it.
But I
think they take it too far.
That's too far,
but
sure.
I think it's a similar thread where you can pull anything you want out of anything if you really try.
Well, and there's times when that's like really crucial to have that skill. Like when you're making a movie, if you look at some of the like famous directors and just filmers and stuff, the colors they use in sets says a lot. And I don't remember the movie, and I don't remember, the story or anything of that. But I remember in one of my film classes, we talked about why did this director make this one door out of the entire movie bright red? And it was to demonstrate like power and to demonstrate that the main character was walking from like his normal life into a life of just like chaos and unknown. And like, you're right. You would be correct in extrapolating meaning from the red door, but that's like an artistic choice. When you're talking about things like texts, like religious texts, it's not an artistic choice that Jesus died on the cross. That's not what that is. It's not, that's not just a story for artistic. What does this represent? No. There's a true martyr meaning behind that. And I think more often than not explained in the text.
Right. And I think there's something similar that can happen with psychology, which is where he's coming from, is psychologists can look for things that are useful for us, for how we live.
Yeah.
So maybe something that he's doing is looking at these stories and pulling out what can be useful, or like what can be learned from them that's useful. And then saying that that's what it represents. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's kind of like a pragmatic argument. That's like, well, we read these, and if he's maybe assuming that they're doing it because it's useful, then like, here's the useful thing that you can get out of it.
Yeah.
Which is like why we can find a lot of what he talks about in this, even if we disagree with some of the stuff, we can be like, oh yeah, the thing he's talking about there, spot on.
Yeah.
Like facts. You can't ignore evil.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
At the same time, though, is that what the Egyptians meant by it?
Right. And I think, and I guess this statement ultimately becomes a critique more than anything else.
Sure.
We both know that Jordan Peterson is brilliant.
Yeah.
And I think he has thoroughly proven his point thus far. So to derive more, more support for his point from religious texts is one such a bold move that I would argue he doesn't necessarily succeed in. Two is completely unnecessary for his point.
I think we talked about, I think it is necessary for his argument.
Why?
Because if you remember back when we first started this book, the whole thing that he's trying to do here is combine all these myths and stuff and religions with the empirical world.
Yeah.
So that he can say that there's some connection. He's trying to solve, we talked about it, the is-ought problem.
Yeah.
What is versus what ought to be. He's pretty much trying to solve that. He's trying to connect the two here.
Right.
So we know he's not going to be successful, but I think that it is absolutely necessary that he goes through the religions
to achieve what
to try and do that.
Okay.
He won't do it successfully, but I think it is It does have to happen.
And I get what you're saying, and I think that's just like that ultimately becomes the fundamental problem that we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you've read it and I haven't, so that's my assumption is it's going to be a fundamental problem that we'll see is that it's going to just not work in his favor, and it's
Mm-hmm.
going to end up like almost immediately in the book like faltering
Yeah.
everything. So then by the end of it, it's like he came to a conclusion that he like fundamentally missed the mark on,
Mm-hmm.
which is
And
like,
I don't know how he's gonna end the book. He might
yeah,
just say,
I don't know.
yeah,
Yeah, that's what I'd say.
because
I
this
don't know.
I learned some stuff about the book
Mm-hmm.
recently, and this is a 13-year project,
Oh,
something like that. He had been studying for researching for 30 years.
if Jordan Peterson
13.
is listening, I'm so sorry. I feel like I'm being so rude
No,
to
don't.
this like massive undertaking because like
No,
this,
I think we're just being open about it.
yeah.
Like, here's the thing. We both know that what he's doing is very intelligent.
Oh yeah.
And like if you are a psychologist and you're an evolutionary biologist and all these things, the way that he's analyzing this
Mm-hmm.
is perfect.
Yeah.
I don't think you could analyze it any better.
Right.
We just recognize as Christians that he's not talking about our Christianity.
And I think that's what makes what we're trying to do with this book unique is that we're approaching this from like a truly like Christian, like a young man Christian perspective
Mm-hmm.
rather than from any other perspective, which
Yeah.
like foundationally is in opposition of what he believes.
Mm-hmm.
But more importantly, I think it's going to bring to light anything that, you know, he misses or he says in wrong context or et
Right.
cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it'd be so cool to go through this
Mm-hmm.
and make these points and make these statements and stuff and have Jordan Peterson like go, okay, I get what you're saying, and like debate.
Yeah.
I think that'd be so cool.
No,
And
it
not
would
just
be.
because Jordan Peterson's
I'd have
awesome.
so many questions after this book.
Right, but like because it'd be so cool just to kind of like hear
Understand it.
yeah,
Mhm.
that oh man, that'd
Or
be
where
so
he
cool.
is now. This book was 1999.
Yeah.
So
Well, and that's like ultimately like always in the back of my mind like what does he think now? What does he believe now?
Right.
Like how much of this book is he looking back and going like, I should have taken this approach because we
Yeah.
all grow no matter what.
obviously, yeah.
So
Yeah.
oh, it'd be
It's-
so
it's-
cool.
Yeah. Um, we're running low-ish on time here, so I'll
Yeah.
try and get through these. We'll go through the story more.
Mhm.
So, Eset's impregnated, gives birth to Horus. Horus is born and he confronts and overcomes Seth, so he kills him. He
Mhm.
loses his eye in the process, but he ends up getting it back, so I don't know why it mattered to the story. But so what Jordan points out is that the story could have ended there.
Mhm.
He could have killed Seth, taken the throne,
Yeah.
boom, he's in his father's spot. That's a
Yeah.
coherent story.
Yeah.
What he does, though, is he descends into the underworld to bring his dad back,
Okay.
which is Jordan Peterson says that's an original contribution added from the Mesopotamian story. Because all that happens in that one is that Marduk kills Tiamat and then he becomes king.
Okay.
This
Yeah.
one is he doesn't just become king after killing the evil.
Mhm.
He goes down and gets his dad back,
Yeah.
the one that was killed.
Okay.
And they make a new kingdom together.
Mm.
So what he
Mhm.
says, this quote, "The kingdom of the Son and Father is an improvement over that of the Father or the Son alone, as it unites the hard-won wisdom of the past, that is of the dead, with the adaptive capacity of the present, that is the living."
Okay. Yeah. No, I don't think there's a flaw in that point at all because we often see mythologies taken from here and here in different civilizations. I mean, look at like, you know, the
Mhm.
Romans versus the Greeks in their
Yeah.
belief structures. It's like identical.
And I think this is a really tough part of how far we let the argument go,
Mm-hmm.
is because he would say that they implicitly understood this.
No,
But then
I don't
when
think
he's
they
talking
did.
about stuff earlier,
Mm-hmm.
he can say, like, we could talk about Frozen.
Mm-hmm.
We could say, the Let It Go
Like
or
the
Let It Be.
movie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let It Be or whatever the song is.
Let it go.
Let It Go. I knew it was one of the two. I should have gone
Let
with
it
that.
be. Let it be.
Shut up. Anyways.
From the hit, from the Beatles comes Frozen 3.
Oh boy. So,
Let it go. Yes.
but you can see how it has a very different implicit message than their older stuff. because it's all about expressing your internal self and not letting anyone tell you who you are not,
Mm-hmm.
which is vastly different from older types of stuff like Lion King,
Mm-hmm.
where it's about him learning how to conform to this role that he's been assigned.
Yes.
Those are vastly different stories.
And I don't
And
like
it's-
that you use the word conformed, because I don't think it's about conforming.
I've been reading Rise and Triumph.
I
and
know.
that's how
I
it's
know.
talked about.
I know. I'm just to clarify, and I know you'll just agree with me. Maybe not, but not inherently conform. I think that puts a negative connotation on the importance of society, but rather to understand the importance of the role.
Well, no, I think it is conform.
Is it?
Because, yeah, I mean, it's your job to find your spot in society.
Sure. But I wouldn't say like,
You're conforming to the society. I know it has a negative connotation.
Sure.
I'm not giving it that.
right.
But that is the point, is to figure out how you exist within your society.
Sorry, I'm just a little soft.
Well, I mean, think about
No,
it. Yeah.
I can't disagree. I'm just saying.
But the point is that that's a way, way different message
Oh.
than what's in Frozen.
Yeah.
And I think that that's an implicit understanding. That's the implicit message that's in those.
Yes.
So we can see it there.
Mm-hmm.
So the difficulty is finding where the line is where we say that that's not what's going on in the Egyptian story. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. I mean, personally, I
And
don't
maybe-
think I don't think they did it implicitly.
Maybe it is exactly what you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
Man, but I don't know, because he makes a convincing point with like Pagier
Mm-hmm.
when he talks about how like children act out stuff first
Mm-hmm.
before they can understand what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like it's imitation, and then it's
Mhm.
dramatic representation,
and then it's
and then it's explicit understanding.
yeah. I was just gonna say understanding, but you sound much fancier.
Well, it has to be explicit, not implicit, because explicit means that you can talk about it and
Yeah,
understand
like
it.
you can observe your own understanding of it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's convinced, like that's what we do.
I get it. I
So
get it.
that's
I-
why it's really tough, I think, to draw this line. And maybe that is what they're doing. Here's the thing. I think that with these mythologies, this could be what is happening.
Sure.
Is that they're doing it. They didn't understand it, but that's the message that their stories were telling.
So you
The-
think they could have just understood it without being aware of their understanding?
Yes.
Okay.
And
And what's Peterson saying, just to clarify?
I think that
Oh,
is
he
what
is.
he's saying.
Okay. I mean,
But he's saying that it's all subjective. Or I mean, he's saying it's all implicit, which I think is a fair point. I think it can still work with Christianity because that's not what Christianity is. And that's why Christianity is different, is because it wasn't created by our implicit
right.
understanding. It was created by God.
Yeah. Well, and this is just like, this would create a rabbit hole of doing research and all this stuff,
Mhm.
but it'd be interesting to see the timeline of these religions, their popularities, their creations and stuff. Because
Yeah,
if it lined up with certain points of like Mesopotamian
Mhm.
religion, and
we can talk about it.
I don't know those timelines.
We'll have more to say. I don't have specifics either, but I was talking to the guy that I'm going through this with.
Yeah.
I had asked him pretty much that. I was like, what of these came first?
Mm-hmm.
We know that some of the stuff in the Bible is the oldest,
Yes.
older than the other things. And like there's
Oh.
some stipulation
Mm-hmm.
that people say that it's not the oldest, because I think the Enuma Elish might be like 6th century BC.
Okay. You have a better history timeline than I do,
Okay,
by
well,
far.
So some of the earliest things that they say are Christian
Mm-hmm.
are the Dead Sea Scrolls,
Mm-hmm.
which I think are somewhere around 1st or 2nd century BC.
Mm-hmm.
So that'd be newer.
Newer. Okay.
The problem is that I wish I remembered. I should have taken notes or asked more details about it. But there's some stuff that is definitely older than that.
Yeah.
Or no, that's what it was. Alexander the Great
Mm-hmm.
had his people in Alexandria, like the library,
Mm-hmm.
writing about Christianity or like Jewish tradition and stuff, which was before that. So we know that it existed before the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Okay.
So that it's not the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's not the first time it came up. So I think the timeline might be vague.
Mm-hmm.
It might be fuzzy. We can look more into it, but it's not like Christianity came after
Right.
necessarily or way after anything.
Mm-hmm.
What Scott thought was that maybe we'll talk about it next time, but it might have something to do with the Tower of Babel,
That would make sense.
where it's
I
the
wouldn't put it
story.
past it.
If it was the same story,
Mm-hmm.
originally when everyone was together, and then once they all get separated with language and stuff, they go off, and then from there, this similar story gets messed up
Okay, that would make so much
because
sense.
then because then one
Because
that
the people at the Tower of Babel are not worshiping God; they're worshiping basically themselves.
yes,
Correct. So like,
so then he splits them up.
okay, so why wouldn't it make sense that the people created beings, gods, that were subject to vices such as they were?
Mm. And that can be part of it too. But one thing we can take from that is something that I've lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
No, it's
Sorry.
fine. It was a good point. Where were we at? Tower of Babel split everybody up.
Yep. That was the point.
We're gone. I'm gonzo.
I'm so sorry, Evan.
It's okay.
I felt like you had such a good point and then I ruined it.
What was I talking about?
What do you mean?
What spurred your comment?
The Tower of Babel.
That's all you got?
Well, you were talking about like that they all these myths seem really similar. And that
Right.
yeah.
The similar thing.
Okay.
That's what it was. Sorry.
Sick.
That's all I needed. The flood.
Uh-huh.
Something that atheists have trouble explaining is how literally all of these cultures all around the world have some sort of flood. And there's some interesting stuff with these old, I think it's the oracle bone stuff in China.
Okay.
They would write stuff down not with words but with pictures.
Mm-hmm.
The picture for something like the paradise at the beginning was like a tree and like two people or something like that. But there was one for a boat that was like 8 mouths, which is the amount of people that were on Noah's Ark.
Mm.
It was like a picture of a ship in 8 mouths or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll look more into it because it's fascinating, and we can talk about it maybe more next episode.
Mm.
But dude, there's some weird stuff. So there's maybe something going on with that idea.
I always kind of had like this feeling that you're a historian. I'm just some guy. But I always felt like if you looked at the root of mythologies and religions across the globe, I always felt like there was going to be numerous underlying ties.
We'll talk about it next episode for sure.
Okay.
It'll be a big topic.
You will be fulfilling young Dillon's theory that everybody else laughed at since I've been in like middle school.
I'm happy to help young Dillon.
Oh man, young Dillon
Yeah.
would be so happy.
All right, so we're almost out of time.
Yeah.
I'll finish up this story here because it's basically done.
Okay.
We already, I guess the story's pretty much over. So maybe I can throw in like one more quote or something about it.
We'll finish it up, and if something stands out, I'll stop you, and then
Okay.
I'll be brief.
So yeah, that's the whole story.
Mm-hmm. That would be the whole story.
Yeah, they came back and they have their new kingdom together, which is better than just one of them.
Right.
1 second. I'm choosing wisely.
Do, 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 don't copyright claim me.
Yeah, you better watch it.
Yeah, I know.
What do we got, like 6 seconds or something of before
Copyright.
it's copyright?
Yeah, I don't know. Hopefully it's not a problem. I don't think it'll be fine.
Okay, we can talk. There's a couple good quotes in here we can talk about.
Mhm.
This one's more related to what we
Are talking about.
have been talking about.
Sure.
So, and this will be the last one. This form, like these myths of stories and stuff, this form is not purposeful mystification, but the manner in which ideas emerge before they are sufficiently developed to be explicitly comprehensible. Which is exactly what we've been talking about.
Do you want to break that down just a little bit?
Sure.
Okay.
So he's saying that these aren't just like weird myths on
Mhm.
purpose. They're not like gods and beings and all these things on purpose.
Right.
Um, but they're just the way that ideas emerge.
Hmm.
They came in a narrative form before they're sufficiently developed into being understood well enough to be explicitly comprehensible. So it's exactly what we were talking about
Yeah.
with um, the imitation and then the narrative representation and the explicit understanding.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that. So he is saying that that's where these came from.
I
These
had.
were ideas that they had that they didn't understand explicitly,
Mm-hmm.
but they were able to put them in a story form that they would understand.
I had a wild thought,
Okay.
and this is, and maybe I shouldn't say it because it's like 100% just a
Speculation.
beyond speculation.
Okay. Well, you've put it out there first.
Okay.
So now we know.
Yeah. Okay. So 100, this disclaimer, what you're about to hear is 100% speculation and has no reference to any facts or logic.
That's a good disclaimer. I like that.
Thank you. Yes.
Now that you've covered your ground.
Thank you. I try. So, what if
Mm-hmm.
at the Tower of Babel,
Mm-hmm.
where the people worship themselves,
Mm-hmm.
God said, "Nope, you're done. Split them up." What if these religions derived from the original people that were split up during the Tower of Babel, and those people decided to create these kind of religion and these stories to to divert attention from God and to keep kind of this idea that they were beyond God.
One idea
Mm-hmm.
is that more so that than they did it that way. It's like they were spread out and stuff, and like they lost the original story,
Mm-hmm.
and over time it just changed and changed and changed
Sure.
into something that's way different. But that would explain why they're all so similar in different ways, is because they came from the same original source,
Yeah.
but they've just been moved around
Mm.
over time by like
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's oral history. Oral history changes over time.
Yeah, of course. Well, and that's something you see in Norse mythology.
Mhm.
Is that like the true heart of Norse mythology is that it was all oral history, and
Right.
and that's
And
why
we
we don't
just
have
know
much
so little
story.
about
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
and it's
It's
unfortunate.
all of these.
I think it's super cool. I think that also has a testament of some sort to Christianity.
Mm-hmm. That it stayed the same.
Not just that it stayed the same, but
It's well documented.
yeah, it's well documented that there was a point to um, move beyond just oral history, just an oral telling.
Sure.
You know, like it was clearly important enough that it needed to be documented and recorded in arguably numerous fashions.
Mm-hmm.
And the other ones were just told.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just a little sidebar comment that doesn't hold much weight, but
Okay. Yeah. I'm gonna throw in one more quote,
Mhm.
just to show a pattern, because we talked about this last episode,
sure.
and we don't have to talk about it for very long because it's just highlighting a pattern.
Mhm.
He says the Christian Revolution, which granted every individual the status of son of God, and as implicitly akin to our modern. Oh, this isn't a complete sentence, so heads up.
Okay, great interjection.
The Christian Revolution, which granted every individual the right of God, and as implicitly akin to our modern notion of the intrinsic human right. So the thing to take out of that is that Christianity had this idea of everyone being the son of God and equal,
Okay.
which is very similar to our modern notion of the modern human right. So the interesting thing is that none of these other mythologies came up with something that would equate to our modern human right, where we're all equal.
But that's like a very, very, very new idea in comparison to
Kind of.
the.
So I don't think human rights are a new idea as much as it's something that evolved out of Christianity in Western tradition. Because
I mean, I get what you're saying. Like my point is that like in. No, I'm not gonna go. You do your thing.
well, so it's this idea where first we had the religion
Mhm.
that told us, and then during the Enlightenment they tried to take the morals and sever them off from the religion,
Mm-hmm.
and then they had to figure out once they did that how to justify them. So I think human rights came out of a consequence of that, where they're trying to sever it from the religion.
Mm.
But it's the same idea.
Mm-hmm.
The human right is in the Bible because we all are equal under God. Nice.
I just hit the mic. I'm so sorry.
We're all equal under God, and that's a human right. Just says we're all equal.
Yeah. Okay.
But
yeah,
without God, you can't say that.
it doesn't make sense.
What like we talked
Yeah.
about.
Well,
I
mean,
what justifies it as being
right.
Because there's no transcendent values if there's no God.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of things that we see that are derived from the Judeo-Christian value system that can't be explained just by logic and reasoning, because it doesn't track.
Yeah.
It just ultimately, like, it goes back to the, like, okay, but why? Which is, I think it is such like
it feels like a
missed question. Why?
Yeah. Well, it feels like a cop out to say it as a Christian,
Mhm.
because God exists. That's why. But it's true.
But it's not a cop out.
I know. It just feels like one of those. It's because we're in a place where you have to rationalize everything.
Yeah.
And you can only rationalize so far. And that's like what the people like Camus and Sartre realized, is that you can't. If there's no God, then there's no meaning. Everything is subjective. You have to find that's literally what Camus said, pretty much, is you have to find your own meaning in the world. So, anyways, I think that's a pretty good spot to end.
Yeah.
This episode was not what I thought it would be.
No?
We focused a lot more on the issues that we had with this, but I'm glad that we're doing that.
I mean, I think nothing, actually.
You don't think?
No, yeah, it's hollow up there.
That's good.
No.
Just means there's room for more.
There's room for more nothing. There's room for the expansion of the mass void. No, I don't want, and I'm saying this like as we're recording, because I think it's important for people listening to understand at least my thought process, and then maybe your interjection. But I don't want the format of this to be just read the quote, explain the quote, and call it good. Like, I want to like break this down from our perspective.
Yeah.
I think our perspective is seldom talked about and seldom represented, which is just young Christian men.
I mean, that's why we started this.
Yeah. And not that explicitly only young Christian men can listen to this, but just I think I would argue that we're underrepresented.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important that we bring the topic of this up to light, because I think there's a lot of important things that are shoved aside that are really important for young Christian men, which is like, it's okay to be a Christian.
Yeah, you're not alone.
And it's okay to have opposing thoughts compared to like the norm that is society. And it's okay to venture into things that might be above your head. I mean, like, we're both technically undergrads.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't even consider myself really a student anymore. But we're in the same age group. Like, we're in that undergrad, we're in that young figuring life out, and we're trying to read Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
Which I think is a testament to just everybody that wants to delve into something that feels a little bit beyond themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when we started, I would argue it was beyond me to be this far in the podcast.
Sure.
But that's the importance of the unknown.
Right. Way to tie it back.
Thank you. Delve into the unknown.
Learn some stuff.
Yeah. Learn things that are beyond you. Learn things that are above you.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge thing here. I mean, when we started, you had to explain literally everything to me.
Mm-hmm.
And now I forget that I need to like say, you should like explain that quote.
I think it's easier now, but I think that's because you have the background knowledge now.
Well, it's just like playing guitar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's going to be easier to learn new chords because you already learned 20 other chords.
Yeah.
You already have the knowledge and
It's like, it's knowing it well enough that you can sight read.
Yeah. Which is a huge music reference that you just made that I think like 5% of the populace.
For those who don't know, sight reading is looking at a sheet of music, like the
for the
notes,
first time,
and just being able to play it.
which sounds easy. I can't explain it in any
Does
other
it sound
context.
easy?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh,
That
I thought it sounds hard.
why? Well, it's like reading a book. Why? Okay, so you understand
Well, I know,
music.
but it's a
Why can't you
performance.
just look
I
at
think
it
people
and just
know
do
it's a
it?
performance, though.
Sure. It sounds easier than it is by
Hmm.
like.
Yeah, it depends on what you're reading, but
Well, of course.
yeah, the point is, it just you have to have a foundation of knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
and then it becomes a lot easier to learn things quicker.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. I'm happy with where this episode went.
no, I'm not unhappy.
Yeah. No, I
I'm
know.
just
I'm
surprised.
Yeah,
I didn't expect it.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap up. Do you have any final remarks? Anything?
Stay tuned for next week, where we can talk about the things that I kept referencing this time.
That's your advertisement, ladies and gentlemen, right there. That's the advertisement. Advertisement of the century by Evan Ansel.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I don't have anything else to say. Thanks for listening to this episode of Lessons Learned. It's always a pleasure to have people here, people listening with us, or listening to us rather.
Hopefully, you like the new setup better.
Yes, hopefully this is much more pleasing to the eyes and the ears. We're excited to have you here. We're excited to be growing slowly but surely. And we're very excited to have you join us for the next episode of Lessons Learned. Please enjoy your week and delve a little bit into the unknown. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Adios.